Why is the shopping cart always in the top right of the screen?
How do companies predict my purchases?
Why do prices end in 9?
Why do fast food companies use red and yellow in their logos?
Why do restaurants always have one expensive menu item?
Researchers, marketers, and very curious people seek the answers for how we make decisions and how we choose products. ClickSuasion finds the secrets that companies use and shares them with you.
Why do I feel better when I bought the last remaining airline ticket?
How do I make choices based on colors and fonts?
Are you tired of being confused and frustrated by your business books? Do you want to do your own business bookkeeping but don't know where to begin? I can help. My name is Crystal Wambeck and I am a certified bookkeeper. I'm the creator of the Simple Bookkeeping Program. This online, work at your own pace video course will take you from confused to confident when it comes to your business books. Log into accountingbycrystal.com and sign up today.
Welcome back to ClickSuasion. This is Michael Barbera, your host. We're here now with Jack Mandeville. We know that Jack recently appeared in the movie Range 15. We also know that Jack has recently been spotted lurking around ABC7's Eyewitness News in Arlington, Virginia. I believe Jack's also been spotted creeping around the White House. We also know that Jack watches Netflix alone in his apartment. And we know that Jack says and posts some ridiculous stuff on the internet. Jack, what don't we know about you?
Oh, geez. Well, what don't you know about? I pretty much put it all out there. One thing people don't know about me, of which there's no reason I don't tell people, it's just I guess it's never really come up, but I have Tourette syndrome. But the non-cursing kind. Everyone's, I know you're afraid, Mike, I'm just going to start, jumping into curse words here. Don't worry, it's not going to happen.
I have my finger actively placed on the mute button.
No, I do. I have Tourette syndrome. I've had it since, I got diagnosed when I was 8. I lied and everything to get into the military, and it's one of those things I've had my entire life.
Because nobody had ever had to lie to get into the military.
Exactly, yeah. That's what, when people say I couldn't get in the military, I'm like, why didn't you just lie? That's what everybody else does.
Jack, in Jack speak, in Jack language, tell us, what is it that you do?
So, to put it simply, I make branded content for, right now, mostly startups or charitable organizations. I have a few consistent clients that I'm doing work for, and then I do one-hitters here and there as well. But yeah, a lot of the times brands with my own social following, they want to pay me to plug their product through my goofy videos on my end, or I'm making video content specifically for their social networks.
Let's peel this onion back a little bit. If you were to post a video of yourself sneezing, it would likely go viral. How do you...
Yeah, right.
I expect to see a photo of you sneezing within the next hour. How do you feel, or why do you feel that your viewers were so likely to share your content regardless of how funny or ridiculous it may be?
For my content specifically, I'll compare myself to some of my other people in kind of the space that I'm in. For example, bigger names like Matt Best, for example, huge following and everything. I don't have near the following that he does. But I have a really niche, loyal group of people that follow me. And so I get really good engagement. As far as numbers-wise, I don't have near the numbers that other people do. But I have a very, from what I'm told, I have a very unique sense of humor within the whole veteran space, is where I make a lot of my money at.
So how does the sense of humor change from someone who's a veteran to a non-veteran?
It's really, realistically, veterans like to always play the card like, oh, we come from a really sick gallows world, which is true, but cops also come from that world. Firefighters come from that world. And, if you go hang out in a comedy club, behind the scenes where all the comics are hanging out, well, everyday comics are crude and have kind of dark senses of humor. It's very common in the military simply because of what's at stake. I mean, essentially, there's no such thing as a taboo subject when you could die at any moment. So, when you're hanging with your buddies overseas and you're waiting to go on patrol, no topic is too taboo to talk about or joke about.
Now, I'm going to assume that you have clients that don't target veterans or service members. How do you, now correct me if I'm wrong with this nomenclature, how do you turn off or transition from targeting that mindset to, say, an audience that doesn't relate to that?
Well, I was only in the military for 4 years, and I've been a civilian for 10 years, so I speak more civilian than I do military. It just so happens I fell into this vets military space where that's the kind of market I needed to focus, the voice on. But I can speak civilian just as well. I think it's not even about whether they're a vet or civilian company. It's more about what they want their voice to be. And I do have clients where I have to do like PG stuff because they're courting politicians while they're also trying to sell something. So my normal brand of how gross and idiotic and how much can I step over that line does not apply to those clients.
Now, we know that you've been in the movie Range 15. You're often on video on the internet. You can easily be a comedian. So why the social media or content creation route more so than being a personality? Or maybe you're both.
Yeah, well, people always ask, like, have you ever thought about doing stand-up? And no, like, I'm a coward, and that takes a lot of guts to be a stand-up comedian. That is, from what I understand, that's got to be one of the hardest jobs in the world, and I'm not saying that sarcastically. I've always, no matter what I'm doing, I've always considered myself a writer first. That's how I started. I started all this as a writer, and writing is my passion. I don't need validation when people laugh at my dumb internet videos. I don't need validation when people tell me they liked my character in the movie. The only time I ever feel good when people say that they like something is if someone says, "Hey, I like that piece that you wrote." For whatever reason, that's where my heart is. So I'm a writer first, and then at the end of the day, these videos, whether I'm out on my own now, but I've worked for other brands in the past. At the end of the day, it's the same principle. You're thinking of a concept, you're putting it on paper, and then after that, you just need to learn how to shoot and edit video. That's the only difference between the writing aspect and creating video content. But everything has to revolve with around the idea and how you're going to put it on paper. Conceptualizing it and then putting it on paper and then executing it. And so everything I go into, I approach it with I'm as a writer first.
So perception is a beast. And for the majority of the listeners understand that perception drives a lot of marketing. And the way one customer perceives one message may be completely different from the way another customer perceives that same message.
Right.
How do you deal with controversy, especially with the content that you create and post? Where is Jack's red line in the sand?
I'll be honest with you. So I have worked in social media for 6 years now, and I'm out on my own now. But before that, I was, I helped build a brand to close to 1 million Facebook followers, a couple 100,000 Instagram followers. So big reach, a lot of comments, right? I am immune to negativity in the comment section because I realize when it comes to the internet, no matter what social platform you're on, you can't do anything right. You're never gonna. You could post a picture of a baby holding a puppy with the words "I love you" on the picture, and someone's gonna get angry about it. Like, it's just the nature of the internet. So I don't. If my client specifically wants to avoid certain things, obviously I'm going to take things into consideration. But for my own personal brand, I don't care. I mean, which is very liberating because you get to be fearless as far as saying whatever you want, and it's a very liberating feeling.
Now, being liberated or having a liberated feeling could sometimes be controversial and cause trouble. Have your social media accounts or posts ever gotten you in any trouble?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of specific events. I mean, it's happened on very small scale, in very small scale ways, and then there's been big scale things in the past. I'm trying to, I mean, I posted something. Right now the whole the kneeling thing with the NFL is super polarizing. It's one of those things that, again, it's the nature of the internet. People are they're absolutists. Like, if you don't think like me, you're against me, and you just see people get so personal and mean, and they're willing to ruin personal relationships over such a stupid topic, right? Well, I made a video kind of making fun of people who get angry about that, essentially, who get angry about the flag raising thing, and it got a lot of negativity in it. But again, I don't care. Like, at the end of the day, like, if they, if I'm going to lose a couple followers, I'm also going to gain a couple followers. I really don't. My goal is not to make them feel good about themselves. My goal is to say what's on my mind, and hopefully like-minded people come on board, or at the very least, they disagree with me. They still like my brand in general. They're gonna stick with it in the long run. But I can't make everybody happy.
Oh, of course not. Nobody could. But I could easily say that you have much larger social media kahunas than I do. So have you ever...
That's because you're a real professional, Mike.
Well, it depends how we define real professional.
Yeah.
Have you ever typed out a post, say on your phone, got that tweet ready, went to hit send, but deleted it instead?
Yeah. Again, I'm trying to think of a specific time that happened. Yeah, there have been times where, because it's what I always make fun of with my content a lot of the time is mob mentality and hysteria and how people go crazy over stuff. And Twitter is the worst place for people kind of when it comes to putting your opinions out. And there have been times, I try to keep it lighthearted on Twitter, but there have been times where I've chimed in on kind of like social issues or like really hotbed issues. And at the end of the day, like, I'm not, nobody cares about my opinion at the end of the day. I'm not a political pundit. That's not why I'm getting paid. Like, it is my responsibility to have some sort of commentary, but as an entertainer and a writer, but not, I don't want to be I don't want to be too political. And I've caught myself jumping into things where I'm like, I should be making fun of this neutrally, not taking a hard stance on it.
What do you think is your favorite post? Not necessarily the post that had maybe the most shares or engagement, but your actual favorite post to you that you ever posted on the internet?
Yeah, you know what's crazy? You ask any content creator, they'll tell you the same thing. The things you put a lot of your heart into and you really have a lot of hopes for and you give a lot of thought to, they bomb. And then the thing that you spent 5 minutes making and it's just really dumb, like it blows up and it just makes you angry. But for me, the favorite thing I've ever done is I worked for an apparel brand up until about 6 months ago called Ranger Up, and we did a lot of video content. Well, the last video I ever did for them, I kind of had carte blanche. I was just let loose and got to do whatever I want, but I did about a 3-minute little animated video. I told you about it when I saw you down in, we were in Jacksonville. We were in Fayetteville. I told you about this video. That's the last time I saw you, is right when this video came out. But it's basically calling out, like, making fun of the stereotypical angry veteran because, again, having worked in social media, specifically in the vet space for the past 5 or 6 years, I've had to just see this element of just angry, bitter veterans. And in an ironic twist, it's kind of made me angry. I'm like, why are these guys so angry? Like, F these guys. So I made fun of them terribly in this video for about 3 minutes, like the hypocrisy and this whole idea that, like, how veterans just eat each other up on the internet. Like, if you disagree with somebody politically, they'll question whether you served or not, or they'll try to downgrade your service. Just this ridiculous thing that veterans do to each other. So I called it out. I called it out in a comedic way. But I was very proud of that video. And it did well. I think it's got like 1 million views now. Or not the greatest, but like, it did pretty well. Or all organic, so.
You say not the greatest, but I imagine there's a listener out there right now just shaking their head like, I just tweeted and I got 1 like.
Well, that's, I had been, I was involved with building up this brand's social presence, for the few years that I was there. So, by that point we had a lot of followers, to see that content right off the bat. Now that I'm on my own, I don't have the same reach as I used to working for that bigger brand. It's kind of all on my personal brand at this point. So I don't have nearly the same reach as I used to.
So a lesson from Jack's playbook for the practitioner who's listening, for the small business owner or the marketing manager at the medium to large organization, how do they make their content go as viral as your content?
So for me, anytime I'm, talking to a potential client, I always tell them, like, comedy is it's my game. It's the only way I know how to sell. So if you want to go the comedic route, obviously know your audience. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You have to be fearless in one way or another. And if you want to make money off of video content, like, you have to do things outside of the box. I always use these guys as an example. 10 years ago, Old Spice was a dying grandpa brand. It was the brand that you saw sitting in a gas station shelf. It was just crappy deodorant, and that was it. Like, nobody gave Old Spice a second thought a decade ago. Then they hired these guys named Tim and Eric, who they have if you've heard of them, they have their own show, their own thing going on with the Adult Swim. They've made a couple movies. But Old Spice hired Tim and Eric to make their commercials. And they did these. That's when you started seeing the guy on the horse and, like, all these crazy, weird, random commercials they were doing. They made deodorant cool. Next thing you know, Old Spice blew up. It was all over the shelves. They were doing body wash. They were doing shampoos and conditioners. Everyone's buying Old Spice simply because these advertisements were just so out of the box and weird and crazy that they made people talk about that brand. Old Spice is still for me, it's still a brand that burns my armpits. But it's cool now.
Jack, what is next for you with, what period? What is next for Jack?
I got a few clients that I'm working with. I'm bringing on more. I'm involved in a tiny little movie that's coming out here in a couple months. That's a good question. You know what? Oh man, this sounds really sad right now. Hey, my girlfriend's right here. Hey, honey, what's next for me? She can't even give me a straight answer. Hey, Mike, I'm huh? Do I have anything? Have I told? This is not me not having things going for me. This is me not acknowledging what I have because I have such a low self-esteem. Baby, have I told you anything good about what I'm doing lately?
Yeah.
What is there anything I'm looking forward to?
I don't know.
Oh, jeez. Okay, this is the saddest interview ever.
Well, not really. I think you maybe gave a lot of people some hope that they are in the right direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, what can I say? It's like I'm bringing on more clients. Like, that's not really sexy. I mean, I've been kind of everywhere. I've been contributing writing for a couple publications. I've been doing things as a personality. I've been doing things like traveling as a personality. But I've been also doing behind the scenes stuff, pushing some charitable initiatives for one of my clients, GCO Consulting. I've been working with the Redskins a little bit, the Redskins Charitable Foundation. I've kind of been all over the map. It's hard to kind of keep track.
See, we can extract that information from you. It just takes a little bit of time.
Well, I just need my girlfriend in the room to remind me of what I have going on in my own life.
Where could we find that good-looking face of yours on the internet?
For my personal brands, you can follow me at on Instagram. It's at Jack Mandeville, JackMandaville. It's the same handle for Twitter, and then on Facebook, I got a like page. But you can also send me a personal friend request because I pretty much accept all friend requests because I have no fear of getting shaken down by a Cambodian drug lord.
Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I'll give you dessert. Final thoughts to the audience.
Yeah, well, just to add on to what I was saying earlier, as far as if you're a brand looking to make a splash on social media, don't be afraid to think out of the box, be a little outlandish, push the envelope a little. People respond well to that, and don't be afraid of the comment section. The worst thing that happens is like someone sees like one person says a negative thing about their product or their content, and they're like, "Oh, we got to take this down." They don't like it. Like, you have to realize there's always going to be negativity there. So just stay away from the comment section and do your thing. And the proof will be in the views and the likes.
So do your thing, be careless, and be fearful. Can we agree that's your message?
Be fearless and just don't be afraid to push the limits a little bit. Especially if you're a startup. Especially if you're a startup.
Jack, absolute pleasure chatting with you. We will be in contact with you. Listeners, go follow Jack on all social media accounts. Hilarious. Jack, thanks for being here. Stay with us on Clickslation. We have several more interviews on this episode.
You always want to look your best, but you don't always have time to deal with a necktie that won't cooperate. That's where we come in. Introducing the Never Tie, the only necktie that you never have to tie. Each Never Tie comes with a tie and 2 removable knots that you simply slide on and adjust for your comfort, giving you the perfect look every time. Choose from over 20 stylish designs at thenevertie.com.
Welcome back to Clicksuasion. Your host, Michael Barbera. Our next guest is Leah Pouw. Here's what we know about Leah. Leah currently leads community systems development at the Chicago-based nonprofit Illinois Action for Children. We know that Leah was the chief of staff to Illinois Representative Deborah Mell. Am I saying that correctly?
That's correct.
All right, I get a point. So, Leah, tell us something that we do not know about you.
Well, I'm an avid bread baker. I've been playing around with sourdough starters for the last 6 to 7 weeks and spent most of my day managing an overload of sourdough starters. So as we speak, I actually have pizza rising, I have sourdough bread rising, and I'm about to make waffles for my kids for tomorrow.
I'm speechless, impressed, and it makes me feel like I do nothing with my life. Okay, Leah, tell us. Okay, so first off, tell us about your organization. Tell us what you do for your organization.
Okay, sure. So Illinois Action for Children is known as a state and national leader in the field of early care and education. Since 1969, Illinois Action for Children has been connecting children and families with resources and services that they need to grow, learn, and thrive. We are known as a child care resource and referral agency, so we provide child care assistance to families, making child care affordable and more accessible for low-income families. We also run early learning programs, including preschool, Head Start, and early Head Start, which is for the little kids. We also do policy and advocacy work that helps to protect and expand access for child care and early education. In addition, we really help to bring up quality for child care centers across Cook County.
What do you do there?
Okay, so for the last 4 years, I've been leading a project called the Early Childhood Innovation Zones, and these have been serving as laboratories for the state of Illinois, where we were helping to inform different strategies that were effective to achieve our goal of ensuring that more children who are very high need are connected to high quality early learning and development programs. That project ran from 2013 to 2017 and was part of Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge Grant, which is a federal program out of the Department of Education and also Health and Human Services. Since 2017, I'm working now on what we call community systems development, and that's really taking the learnings from these innovation zones to continue working in Cook County and around the state to help connect more kids to early learning programs using innovation and using behavioral science.
I have to back up a little bit. Sometimes I feel that I am high need. How do you define high need?
So the state of Illinois defines high need as children who are living in poverty and deep poverty, families of who are children of teen parents, maybe parents who have a lower education, maybe they didn't graduate high school, they have a GED. We also work with children and families who are in the child welfare system, those who might be experiencing homelessness, children with special needs or a learning disability, and also those who might be an immigrant, a refugee, or a migrant worker.
Before I go any further with any more questions and want to continue the conversation, I just want to do a quick call to action. So if there's anybody who's listening that feels like they may benefit or they know someone who may benefit from your services, what is the application process? What is the process to get in contact with you?
Sure. So the first thing you can do is visit our website. You can learn a little bit more information about the organization and about these innovation zones. So our website would be at www.actforchildren.org. That's ACTFOR children.org/innovation zones with a plural. And you could also reach me at leah.pouw@actforchildren.org. So that's Leah, LEAH.POUW @actforchildren.org.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. I hope someone can use that, but also hope that no one needs to use your services. Okay, so how does behavioral economics apply to what you're doing?
Okay, so the way that we've been working with behavioral science is to increase access, equity, and, as I said, sustainability for children to get to these early learning programs. What we really spent time looking at was the idea of present bias and scarcity, and how, whether it's families or community partners, are making decisions to solve this hard problem of getting families who are really high need into early learning programs.
How does it look in, well, let me rephrase that. How do you put that into practice?
Okay, so some of the things that we did was to really make things easier, work on increasing motivation or support, and then also using small experiments in the work that we did. So some of the things that we did, especially when it comes to decision making or that idea of choice under uncertainty. So what we found both with collaboration partners that we worked with and also our families is that there's just so much going on. We know from ourselves when we're living with stress that it can be hard to make decisions. It could be hard to make doctor's appointments and remember to get really important tasks done. We looked at the issue of how time feels for people when they're living under stress and with scarcity. And then we worked with local communities to try to help them design their programs to address that issue for families. One of the ways that we did that was to work on reducing that kind of mental and physical effort. One example is that we suggested, so there's an application form to apply for early learning programs. One of them is 16 pages long. The form itself is designed in such a way that a family would fill out page 1 and page 2, and it's a back-to-back form. On page 2, that's the one I'm supposed to keep for myself. Page 1 is the one I'm supposed to turn in to, actually, sorry, let me say that the other way. Page 1, I'm supposed to keep. Page 2, I'm supposed to give back to the enrollment application site. Most people tear off that one page that's back-to-back and then forget, right? So they get mistakes, and then it takes a lot of time for them to get their application done correctly. So some of the design work that the Innovation Zones tried was to, instead of double copy the 16-page application, they would do a single photocopy so that page 1, when it's torn off, is they don't make the mistake of keeping the wrong form.
Leah, what are some adverse ways that behavioral economics or nudges have worked against you?
When I think about the ways that they have worked against us, I might say that it's in the understanding of the people that we're trying to teach to be able to use these methods in practice. So the project that we've been doing is almost like a train the trainer model. So we created a framework for these local innovation zone communities to be able to use, and trying to introduce what feels like a complicated topic to these local community collaborations can sometimes be challenging. There can be resistance in terms of people thinking that using behavioral science might be manipulative. It might be manipulating the people that we're working with. And what we've tried to do is actually talk about this in terms of just real life experiences, talking about how we use data to slow down our decision making and how we break things into smaller pieces rather than having big plans and big projects, because by making it into smaller pieces, we can actually see where we might be making errors based on moving too quickly.
So I think we covered so much how the parents or the guardians may benefit from BE being applied here. Obviously, we know how the children benefit. How do you use BE in working with policymakers and community organizers?
Okay, that's a great question. So some of the things that we do is, when I was talking about the different priority populations that we have, so we're working with families who may be experiencing homelessness, families that are in child welfare systems. What we've been teaching communities to do is to bring those partners to the table to really help with the planning and decision-making of the work that they're doing to try to increase enrollment and access for those children and families. So the way that we use behavioral economics with these partners is by, for example, creating scripts for some of these partners to be able to use as they're talking to their own clients. So for example, a case manager who works at a homeless shelter, if we provided a script for that shelter case manager to say to a family member, that makes it a lot easier for them to be able to kind of make that intervention and make that connection and make that referral for a family to then go to an early learning program. What we also worked with is that working with a case manager can be effective, but actually working with a director of even, say, a medical clinic in a local community that's a very high need area. So you get a medical director and talk to the medical director to kind of partner with this referral process. They can then talk to all of their nurses or pediatricians who can then talk to all of their clients. What we found with this project is that unlike maybe some of the folks who are using behavioral economics, everything that we're doing is analog versus digital. So these are human relationships, really getting to know our customers, really getting to know the families and children and partners and the different needs that they have. So that's been a little bit of a different process. It's not necessarily that it slows us down, but it really forces us to be engaged in a relationship and getting to know them. And again, kind of using that data and using a series of small experiments to help us test things out with these partners, adapt, test, adapt, and really putting that behavioral science right into the design of the strategies that we're using with these partners.
How does your organization define success? What does success look like when an individual has completed your program?
So success for someone who's gone through the training that we have provided, we spent a lot of time building capacity of these local partner collaborations. So for the Innovation Zone project, there were 11 communities located throughout Illinois, and all of them were located in a high need area, whether that was in rural Southern Illinois, the greater East St. Louis area, suburbs of Chicago, or the city of Chicago itself. We would define success for these partners as they have the capacity to be able to use data, to think in an analytic way, and gather and plan innovative strategies with their partners using a frame of behavior science or behavior thinking. We really spent a lot of time teaching them how to, again, to that point of know your customer, what is hard, what would make it easier, teaching them to get outside of the building, really leaning on some of the lean startup principles of keep calm and get outside of the building, the idea that you would pivot or persevere, the idea that they would kind of have it as a habit, that they would be asking their customers what it is that they need. So if my partner would be a pediatrician and I'm asking them to use one of my scripts, success for us would be that the collaboration is asking that pediatrician what's hard about using this script and how can we actually make that easier for you. Likewise, we would want them to be able to ask that of parents as well, so to engage parents in the process, to understand what's not working for them when it comes to enrollment, when it comes to attendance, when it comes to accessing a program. Our programs are successful if they're actually asking the parents what is hard about enrollment right now.
You mentioned earlier, know your customer. And I think this is an area that many nonprofits might benefit from learning or diving into. So let's take yours, for example. Let's use yours as the model. You have several customers. You have the end user, which is likely the child or teenager, depending on who is the recipient of the program. There are parents, there's policymakers, there's donors for fundraising, there's community organizers. Can you run through additional customers you may have and what their role is in your organization?
Sure. So we might also have, as you said, we have parents, we have these diverse community partners. There might be a refugee center. We have a model that we've used with something called, this is sort of a nonprofit term, but it's a cascading logic model. So the idea that when you're working in network systems, that every change you make or every kind of point of intervention may have impact on another point in your network system. So for example, if I'm trying to impact children and families would kind of be up a level. Above families, it would be providers. You might have your community partners who are serving these children and families. Then you have the state, municipal, county, regional entity who might be administering that program. Above them, sometimes you have a whole other layer of state officials. And then above that, you have kind of these state agency director heads. And then above that would be your elected officials. So a lot of the work that we do, we think of this as something that you might think of as kind of above and below the line. So if there's an imaginary line between the local community work and kind of the above the line advocacy work, what the project has helped us do is to listen to what's going on in the community. And if state agencies have local programs and children as their customer, our Innovation Zone project and this community systems type work actually takes the voice from the local community and brings it up above the line into that policy and advocacy space. So we're helping to make policies better for the state of Illinois. We're helping to make policies better for children and families to have better access to the work that they're doing.
So what you're saying is that you don't get much sleep.
No.
Leah, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I admire what you do for your organization and what your organization does for Cook County and the city of Chicago. If anyone, I know you gave it your information earlier, but we'll do one more time. If anybody who's listening wants to get in contact with you, how could they reach you?
Okay, so the best way, again, is through email. So that's leah.pouw@actforchildren.org. And the second way would be to visit our website. So that would be at www.actforchildren.org. And if you did /innovation zones, then you would learn more about the project itself and be able to learn about our community systems development work that's going on throughout the state of Illinois.
Our final guest for today's episode is Avalon Levey. Stick with us. We'll be right back with Avalon.
You know when your customers are shopping at your business and they pick up a product? The customer holds it, feels it, and shows it to their friend. Then they look at the price tag.
Oh my, I need to look at something else.
The customer picks up a second item and loves the way it looks. They've heard of this product, but haven't yet seen it in person.
I've got to have this.
You're happy the customer chose to buy a product, but you're equally frustrated that they didn't buy both items.
I want them both.
The Consumer Experience Lab at Barbera Solutions designs behavioral strategies that target the consumer's decision-making process. BarberaSolutions.com. Because the opposite of rational is not irrational. BARBERA Solutions.com.
Welcome back to Clicksuasion. This is your host, Michael Barbera. Right now, Avalon is joining us. Avalon, what we know about you, we know that you are an organizational change management consultant. You work with the UN to resolve human rights issues or concerns in North Korea. And we know that you have an interest in behavioral finance. What don't we know about you?
You probably don't know that before I went into consulting on a practice level, I went door to door for local consulting to businesses downtown Fayetteville, North Carolina.
How did that work out for you?
It was fun to hear about the dreams and wishes of all the businesses, and I really loved working with the people, but it was very hard to get paid.
That is an important part of consulting or any business.
Yes, and it was one of the biggest lessons that I learned in financial decision making, that you have to value your own work, and if you don't get paid for it, no one else will value it either.
That's a really good point. And I'm aware that you have a story to share with us.
I do. So one of the first clients that I had, I call this story Pay Me Now, Pay Me Later. The client was in a situation where they felt that they could not afford change management services throughout the life cycle of the project. And change management is a huge undertaking. There's a communications aspect, the change management aspect itself, where you identify the change impacts to each group. that is undergoing and affected by the change, and then help them prepare for those changes over time. And then there's the training aspect where they actually get ready to be able to perform their jobs differently based on the changes that they'll be undergoing. And so if you don't do change over time, you end up with a whole lot of change all at once when the system goes live. And as soon as the system went live, they had a crisis. And so suddenly there was money to deal with the crisis, but there was no money to deal with a well-managed project all along the course of the project. So we kind of see this a lot. It's pay me now or pay me later. There's no money during the course of a well-managed project, but there's always money for a crisis. And what we end up doing when we first talk with a client, now we say, it's a pay me now, pay me later.
How would you define crisis?
Crisis, where the end users of a brand new software don't know how to use it, where you've got incoming payments to the company that the invoicing department can't process because they don't know how to use the new system, where anything that is necessary for the business to keep going stops. And usually that's when people don't know how to do their jobs anymore, if there's a new system that they haven't been trained on.
So why do you feel like an individual, or why do you believe an individual would be hesitant to pay for the services, but would easily open their wallet or sign a check, authorize a payment for a crisis or emergency service?
Why not pay when things are going well? I think there's a misconception that when things are just kind of chugging along, they're going well, because you don't always have measurement checks in place to see if indeed things are going according to plan, because sometimes you don't know what to check for. For example, there's a survey that we like to send out as change management professionals to check in with the end users and see if they can explain what the project is to a colleague, if they understand why the project is happening now. And you might not know to ask questions like that if you're not deep into change management. So you might think everything's fine, but if you knew that your employees didn't believe the leadership was serious about the project and kind of felt that it would drop off later on in the quarter, then you'd know there was a serious problem, and you'd want to check in on that and make some adjustments to your plan. But not knowing that, it doesn't look like there's an issue, and so the crisis often doesn't become apparent until all of a sudden the result is no one knows what to do on day one of go live. There's also Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, go.
A second thought on that, why companies are often willing to open up their pocketbooks, as you say, when there's a crisis. Oftentimes there are competing priorities within a business where you have several change projects going on at once. And so in that case, maybe one project seems like it's going really well and another one's in crisis, and they might even pull funding from a project that's going well to backfill what a project that's not going well has already spent. And so there you have a situation where a project gets money taken away from it and it's not even their fault, but then they get fewer resources because the priorities of the company as a whole are not being thought of strategically or being timed strategically. So I think there are those two problems of strategic change, too much going on at once, and not being aware of a crisis when it's coming.
Without creating an adverse situation at the work site, what are your thoughts on creating a scenario where your project is now the crisis and therefore makes you higher in the order of precedence to be paid?
Are you talking about creating a faux crisis to get attention?
Maybe not so that much that far, but maybe treating your project as a crisis or treating it with more a higher level of importance to the client.
Okay. So often we don't have to, as consultants, make the case that the program is in crisis. We raise the risks and we leave it to the project managers to make the case to their leadership, because ultimately, as consultants, we're not responsible for the future of the company. The people who work there, the leaders of the program, need to be fully accountable and responsible, or else they don't have ownership. And that's something that we see a little too often, where a project is pushed on consultants to say, here, you do this, you deal with this. And if we're not there to work after the project is over, all the employees haven't seen the leadership buy in to this project, and so it doesn't really stick. They also don't know us, don't respect us, so they don't listen to us when we say this is really serious. It always has to come from the business. So as consultants, we raise the risks, but if you have to raise a flag and say this is a crisis, someone from the business has to do that.
If you were on your own as your own consultant, or you can create any solution possible with unlimited resources to solve this problem, what would it be?
I think measurement tools go a long way to red flagging crises before they pop up in your face as a true crisis. So I'm dreaming of a measurement tool that goes beyond surveying. If I really had unlimited money, we're talking about observers in every office space who could overhear people talking about the project, what their impressions are of the project, taking notes all day long. Maybe even some technology that would give us clues into how people are perceiving the project and how people are, at what rate people are buying into it on a personal level. And that might mean behavioral checks of, did they attend this meeting? Did they attend this call? Did they participate when we asked them to share out this information to the rest of their group? And I think there are some sophisticated ways to do that with technology that are in the works or even available now, but having those checks along the way to say this group in particular doesn't believe in the change, that would allow a company or a group of consultants or change management professionals to target that group to say, hey, what's going on? What can we do to help you learn more about the project, understand what the benefit is going to be to you, so that they can head off a crisis before this particular group stands up and says, we're not participating and all quits. That's a crisis.
Now, how does the client and the consultant benefit from that solution?
The client certainly benefits from having a targeted approach where each individual who's being asked to participate, we would get insight into whether they're choosing to participate or opting out. And if they're opting out, we could figure out why and then have a catered approach to talking to them about it, working with them about it. If they don't believe the solution is correct, bringing them in on what's being built so that they have a stronger voice in the building of it, and so it can work more for them. And sometimes it's perception, and sometimes it really doesn't work, and sometimes it's people want to be included and they feel that they haven't been, so they walk away. But for the client, having that insight gives you the power to make decisions about who you're going to approach, about what, and what strategies you're going to use to bring them in on a change. Now, for the consultant, the benefit would be having less unfocused time. So when we don't have data about who needs what, when we don't know who has the knowledge to apply themselves differently in their job than they were doing before, then we don't know who to give training sessions to in what particular way to help them. So it's similar on both sides. You have more successful consulting when you know who needs what, and you have more successful adoption of change from the client side. Everyone's ready at the same time. And really, the biggest benefit, I think, is that timing issue, because foot dragging costs companies so much money. And so if you know who's foot dragging early on, then you can approach that before go live and avoid losing that productivity.
Is foot dragging a technical term or an Avalon term?
I'm sure that other people use it, but foot dragging, what would be the technical term for that? Resistance.
Resistance.
Yes.
So let's drag our feet into another story, since a little birdie tells me that you have a second story to share with us.
I do. I call this one penny wise, pound foolish. So I had a client, and they wanted to do surveying, similar to the kind that I've been discussing, dreaming about. And the software to do it, to really do it right, where you would get each group would be surveyed separately. You'd get a color graph of where each group is at in the process, starting from awareness and going through to the desire to individually participate, all the way through to reinforcement of a change after it's taken place, where everyone agrees that we're not going back to the old ways. And colored graph, red, yellow, orange, green, where individuals even are at in the process, not even by groups. So excellent, sophisticated software, costs $600 a year, totally reasonable for what it is. But the client was very hesitant to spend that much money on this software. We had 3 weeks of meetings, 3 meetings a week, an hour each, to discuss this, with rooms of at least 5 people, sometimes as many as 10, to discuss whether or not we were going to use this software. And so they wanted a demo, and then they wanted a bigger demo. And then there were a lot of questions about, well, how do we know that it's worth it? And in the course of all these meetings and discussions, they spent thousands of dollars in time. And when they were aware that the time cost money, because when we were in bigger groups, maybe 20 people, someone would say, this meeting costs this maybe $10,000 for each person's hour, because the consultants are billing by the hour. And so they were aware of that cost, but they chose to spend so much time in indecision that we could have bought this software 10 times over at least. So penny wise, pound foolish, looking at the tiny purchases and facing away from them while spending all this money not so unwisely really strikes me as a financial decision example that can be blown up, both thinking about time and about the little purchases and the big purchases.
I want to go all the way back to when you said there were 10 or so people in this room. What is the responsibilities of each of these 10 individuals? What I'm getting at is, who of those 10 people sign their name on the dotted line or sign the check? Who is actually the decision maker for that program, that software?
That is a great question. Only one person was responsible, and that one person is who kept bringing people in to different meetings. I think he didn't want to make a decision. I think he wanted to spread out the decision making amongst others. But these people didn't have the authority. They could make suggestions, they could make their opinions known, but they didn't have the authority. And so really it felt like a stall tactic, and ultimately we didn't end up buying the software, and we didn't even end up using surveys.
Do you feel that the actual decision maker might have been hesitant to purchase the software because he or she would have been responsible for the outcome if it had gone awry?
The outcome of the purchase of the software or the outcome of the surveys?
Well, both. What if the software didn't work as properly? Well, he or she could be nervous that the project wouldn't be beneficial to the organization. It could be wasted money, that the surveys may not come out in or present information that would be beneficial to he, she, their team, or the organization, or a number of other constructs that could be there. But I'm curious about how much that individual is worried about their name being on the line for being responsible for that project.
So based on the fact that we ultimately didn't choose the software, and even though I drew up a much more primitive version of the survey tool to use to run the surveys anyway, and they chose not to run the surveys, my impression was that this decision maker was worried about what the results of the surveys would be. So, for example, they were worried, what if no one knows what the project is? What if no one wants to participate? And my argument was, well, then we'll know what we have to do. We'll know what ground we have to make up. We'll know who needs special attention. And they were very concerned about the survey results being shared with the leadership. And from a consultant's view, this is part of that data that we have to collect in order to know how to do our jobs better. So the kind of funny, not so funny part of it all is that after deciding not to do the software and not to do the surveys, the head of the company ran a survey anyway, without the project manager's knowledge, without the decision maker's knowledge, without my knowledge. And the questions were similar, not as well targeted, but the results were about what he'd have expected. No one knew what the project was. No one understood how it fit into the greater strategy of the company at the time. No one felt like they were being communicated to, and it was one thing after another that looked like a failure. But because we hadn't run the survey ourselves, the survey wasn't broken up to be run for specific groups. So it's possible that these questions went to people who were not impacted by the change, who had nothing to do with the project, and who had never heard of it because it didn't affect them. So ultimately, they ended up with data that wasn't very good, that didn't make them look very good, and that they could do nothing about, because they didn't have it targeted, and they didn't have any action items out of it either. So if you don't put the time in to figure out what's going on with your project, there's certainly a risk that someone else will. And it'll be out of your control at a level that you won't be able to do anything about it.
Tell us your thoughts on the difference between having no data and bad data.
No data is where you just don't know anything. But bad data, bad data gets me. So bad data is where you have information, but it's either categorized poorly. So one really great example is where you have a bunch of different people in an office, doesn't matter how big it is. Some people use USA to classify countries, some people use the United States of America, and some people use America. Now, when all of that is in a system, it doesn't recognize those three as the same thing, so you have data all over the place that's not categorized and that you can't use to help you. That's bad data. Also bad data is where you have information that's not in a usable form because it's either all mixed up qualitative and quantitative, so you can't run any regressions with it. You can't run numbers or distributions. And then the third kind of bad data that drives me nuts is that untargeted data. So if you survey a whole company, are you ready for this change? And only 100 people in the company out of 10,000 are impacted by it. These responses aren't going to help you, especially if you don't know who they're from. So even if you do know who they're from, you're not going to get a good distribution if you survey too many people for something that doesn't affect them.
Avalon, this has been phenomenal. I really enjoyed your stories. I'm sure that a lot of listeners have also enjoyed your stories. I'm going to have to borrow those names from you to share those stories online when this publishes. And if any of the listeners want to get in contact with you, how could they reach you?
Find me on LinkedIn, Avalon Levey, Avalon. Levey, Levey. I'm the only one.
Are you sure? Now it makes it a challenge now, doesn't it?
If there's another Avalon Levey, I would love to meet him or her.
Listeners, that is your challenge. If you find another Avalon Levey out there on LinkedIn, go ahead and blow up this Avalon's message box and prove her wrong. Avalon,
Yes.
it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Stay tuned with us, and we will be right back.
Are you tired of being confused and frustrated by your business books? Do you want to do your own business bookkeeping but don't know where to begin? I can help. My name is Crystal Wambeck, and I am a certified bookkeeper. I'm the creator of the Simple Bookkeeping Program. This online, work at your own pace video course will take you from confused to confident when it comes to your business books. Log into accountingbycrystal.com and sign up today.
Today we've heard from three amazing practitioners. We've heard from Jack Mandeville, Leah Pouw, and Avalon Levey. Stick with us. Stay with ClickSuasion. Subscribe to ClickSuasion wherever you get your podcasts. iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio. Wherever you listen, we are there. Till next time, this is Michael Barbera. Go ahead and subscribe, and we'll let you know when the next episode is available.
Thanks for listening to ClickSuasion. Subscribe to the podcast, read our research, and get in touch with us at clicksuasion.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @ClickSuasion.